Okay, so today we are starting with semantic analysis. Uh, Basically, we're starting with the fourth module, okay, which is about semantic analysis. So earlier we have seen we were looking at language. We did morphological parsing on the language. We identified the different morphemes. Then we talked about POS tagging, and then the output of POS tagging can be given to a parser where the structure of the language, we're checking whether the structure of the language is a proper one or not using syntactic analysis or parsing. So that is the so this much we have covered. Okay, now we are moving on to the semantic part. So I think this is the same way of progression in the case of compiler design also, where we identify the tokens and then we move on to parsing where we identify the correct syntactic structures and so on. So semantic analysis is about identifying the meaning of a sentence. Okay. Okay, semantics is about the meaning of the language, and semantic analysis takes natural language sentences and maps them onto some representation of meaning. Okay. And the major parts, it consists of two parts: lexical semantics, that is a study of meanings of individual words, and then study of how individual words combine to give meaning to a sentence. So this is the major focus of semantics. Semantic analysis is about lexical semantics, it is identifying meaning of individual words, and then how do you combine the meaning of these individual meanings can be combined to form the meaning of a sentence. How do we do that? Okay, so that takes us to what is known as a principle of semantic compositionality, of Frege's principle, which states that the meaning of a whole sentence is comprised of the meaning of its parts or the constituent words. So this is true. That is, in most cases, this is true. That is generally, if you take a sentence, the meaning of the whole sentence is can almost be generated by combining the meaning of their parts generally, but there are exceptions, right? It is not true, always true for natural languages. For example, idioms, or you can have phrases like she passed the exam in flying colors. That is a phrase which is usually used. Flying colors. So flying has one meaning and colors is also has another meaning. So if you take that phrase, combining them does not give the actual meaning of passing with good marks, right? That is a meaning which we mean. So it is not always true that the meaning of a whole sentence is a combination of the meaning of the parts which make up it. That is the meaning of the words. But that is a general principle. Okay, and the principle is called Frege's principle. Okay, so word meaning is just one component of semantics. And the relationship that exists between words, the domain of that particular sentence, the order of the words, the syntactic structure of the sentence, the underlying context, and world knowledge, not word knowledge, world knowledge, all contribute the meaning of a sentence. So exactly when we talk about meaning of a sentence, it is more than just the words which actually give you the meaning. It is when the domain in the sense you might be talking about science, or you might be talking about technology or literature or movies. It could be any domain, and depending on the domain you are talking about, the word meanings can actually change, and the order of the words can also, many things actually influence the meaning. The syntactic structure, the context in which a particular word is used, and also general world knowledge. So we have already talked about this, the different uh, what contributions to meaning. We have already talked about it in our initial classes, and but still, it. But when we talk about semantics, mostly important things we talk about is lexical semantics and compositional semantics. That remain the dominant approach to semantics. So the most important concepts when we talk about semantics is the lexical semantics, that is semantics or meaning of words, and compositional semantics, that is how do you combine the meaning of words to form the meaning of sentences. That is the main focus. Now, how can meaning be represented? Okay, how can meaning be represented? Yeah, the meaning representation of languages. Uh, that is language. What is a language used to represent the semantics? Now, commonly used meaning representation. How do you represent the meaning of a particular sentence? So, commonly used meaning representation languages are first order predicate calculus or first order predicate logic. One is that semantic networks, conceptual dependency. I think all of you must be familiar with this first order predicate logic, which you must have studied in discrete mathematics. Okay, so that is the one which we will be focusing here. That is, how can the meaning of a sentence be represented? So here we'll be studying how first order predicate logic can be used for representing meaning. Okay. Now, before going into first order predicate logic or first order propositional logic, we look at what are the characteristics of meaning representation languages. Ideally, for a meaning representation language, what are the characteristics that it should possess? The first is verifiability. So verifiability means we must be able to determine the truth of our representation. Okay, we must be able to determine the truth of our representation. Now, in order to determine the truth, we have to it should be possible for us to compare whatever we have with a knowledge base in the domain. Okay, say for example, does Kingfisher serve Hyderabad? Is a question. Okay, so does Kingfisher serve Hyderabad? So you can represent this in one form as serves Kingfisher, comma Hyderabad. Okay, now it should be possible for this representation to be compared to a knowledge base. That is, whatever representation you use. Here, this representation is something similar to predicate calculus and predicate logic. This is how you represent a sentence. Now, Kingfisher serves Hyderabad is represented like this. Okay, now, any representation we use, it should be possible that we should be able to compare this representation to a knowledge base where we have stored wherever with all locations that Kingfisher is uh, uh, that is Kingfisher services. What are the cities that Kingfisher serves? So that is actually placed in a knowledge base, and it should be possible for us to verify the correctness of this using a knowledge base. Okay, so the representation should facilitate a comparison of this with a knowledge base. Okay, unambiguous. So I don't think more explanation is required. That is, whatever representation we have, there should be only one possible way that that particular representation. That is, there is only one interpretation for whatever we represent. That is unambiguous. What the knowledge has to be represented or meaning has to be represented in an unambiguous way. This is another characteristic. Okay, next is there should be some canonical forms or some standard representation is required. Say for example, these three. Does Kingfisher serve Hyderabad? Does Kingfisher offer a flight to Hyderabad? Does Kingfisher have a flight to Hyderabad? Basically, all these three questions actually mean the same thing. Right. So, but if you are going to look at these three sentences, each of these three has different words. Each of these three have different syntactic structures, and maybe our representations also will be different. That is, the way we represent each one of them might be using a different what a different that is the representation we said serves Kingfisher, comma Hyderabad. If this is a representation we are going to use, look, offers flight, comma, Kingfisher Hyderabad. That will be the representation for this, right? Here we said it is serves. That is a predicate. In case of predicate logic, this is how you write. Serve, Kingfisher, comma, Hyderabad. This is how we write, right? But in the case of this, we have offer, offer a flight. That is our predicate. Again, offer a flight, Kingfisher, comma, Hyderabad. And so each of these has a different representation for the, but we know each of these, all the three actually mean the same, right? Each of these things mean the same thing. So different representations might not match the knowledge base. Okay, hence the need for a canonical representation. So there has to be some standard way that it is possible for us to represent all the three. So what can be done is for all the three to map the same canonical form, we should be able to understand that serve and offer a flight as well as have a flight are the same concept. So all these three are mean the same thing. So that comes under words and their different senses. So we'll study word sense disambiguation, where we'll understand the different senses for the same word, or how that is you can map these words actually to the same sense also. Okay, that we'll come to later. So the basic idea is we should be able to map all these three questions to some standard form which mean the same thing. Okay, inferences and variables. Okay, any sort of knowledge representation, it should support inference. You must have come across predicate logic earlier also. So it should be possible for us not only to represent language but also infer something from already existing language. Okay, already existing language or already existing knowledge. So we already saw that we can use different types of logic to represent meaning or knowledge, which we can say. But here we will be looking only at two types of logic. One is propositional logic and the other is predicate logic. Okay. So propositional logic, the basic unit of propositional logic is the concept of a proposition. Right. So proposition is any declarative statement or any declarative sentence that has a truth value associated with it. That is called a proposition. That is, it has a value of either true or false. Okay. Say for example, Sydney is the capital of Australia. Sydney is not the capital; it is Canberra. So this is false. It has a truth value of false. So this is a proposition. Similarly, the lowest point on earth is located near the Dead Sea. I don't know whether it is true, but either it can be true if it is correct, or it will be false. Anyway, you will have a truth value associated with it. So this is also a proposition. The Euphrates is the longest river in the world. I don't know whether it is true. Probably it is Nile or Amazon or whatever. I don't know. But anyway, either it will be true or it will be false. So you can say this is a proposition. Okay, so this statement is also a proposition. Similarly, John will defend his thesis on June 12. It might be true or false, right? But let us look at these statements. No, thank you. Here, there is no truth value which we can associate with the statement. So this is not a proposition. Similarly, 1 kilo of tomatoes, please, is also not a proposition because you cannot give a truth value for this. This is not exactly true. So here you cannot give either a true or false. There is some vagueness there. So we cannot say it is a proposition. So these are not propositions. But whenever we have a statement like this for which we can assign either a true or false value to it, then it is said to be a proposition. Okay. So that is what a proposition is. Now, in order, propositional logic is generally used for representing knowledge or meaning. So it is not simple statements that we need to represent. We might also need to represent more complex knowledge statements or meaning statements. So we have other operators called logical connectives. Okay, there are logical connectives which can be used to combine different propositions in order to form more complex statements. So the five connectives are negation, conjunction, disjunction, implication, and bicondition. So we look at each of these. So negation is the not operator. So I am happy. That is a if that is a proposition, then I am not happy. That is a not operator. So you know the truth table is like this. So if the proposition P is true, then not P is false, and the reverse is also true. That is a negation operator. Similarly, conjunction. Conjunction we know is the and, P and Q, right? And when you have and, we know when both the propositions are true, then P and Q is true. Otherwise, it is false. right? Say John saw the painting. Let us say that is P, and John liked the painting. Let us say is Q. Both are propositions. Okay. Now, when you say P and Q, John saw the painting and he liked it. Then you say this P and Q, right? John saw the painting, but he didn't like it. That is, John saw the painting is true and he did not like it, not Q, right? John saw the painting, however, he didn't like it. The same meaning P and not Q. John liked the painting, although he had not seen it. So John liked the painting is actually it is a Q, right? Q, and although he had not seen it, so it is not P, right? So this is how we combine statements. Disjunction is the or, right? Disjunction is or operator, P or Q. So or means it will be false only when both P and Q are false, otherwise it is true. So John goes to school or Mary goes to school. John works at the library or Mary works like sorry, John works at the library or John works at home. Next, we come across implication. So, in implication operator, it is actually represented using this symbol. So, if P and Q are propositions, what P implies Q says is, if P is true, then Q is true. Okay. So, what it says is, if P is Q, so if P is Q, then Q is true, then you say that P implies Q is true. Now, if P is true, then Q is true, you say it is true. If P is false, we are not making any statement in the implication. So, P is false, then it can be either false, Q can be either false or true. Either way, you have this will be have a truth value of true. Okay. Now, if P is true, then Q is not true. Then you say the P implies Q statement is it has a truth value of false. Okay. So if we look at this, if it is nice out, I will go play sports in the park. Okay, let us assume it is nice out. Then I will go play. Okay, forget about that. We look at the next example. If London is the capital of Maldives, okay, London is not the capital of Maldives, right? So which means this part P is false. P is false ആണെങ്കിൽ then Paris is the capital of Sri Lanka, which is also false. Either way, if both are false also, you can say the full statement, the truth value is true, right? P implies Q is true. If you are Mary and you are Net friend, then Earth is round. Let us say I am not Mary's friend. Okay, so let us say this is false, but Earth is round is true. So if it is false and if it is true also, the whole statement truth value is true. What about this one? If Damascus is the capital of Syria, then 8 plus 5 equals 20. Damascus is the capital of Syria. That is true, right? Then 8 plus 5 equals 20 is false. So if first P is true and Q is false, then this full statement has a truth value of false. Okay. Okay, then you have the biconditional operator represented by this, and actually shows a relation, equivalence relation between two propositions. And in this case, the proposition P implies Q is true if both propositions P and Q have the same truth value. Okay, that is, this is true when both are true, then double implication is true. Both are false, also double implication is true. Otherwise, in these two cases, it is false. So this is what biconditional is. Now, what is a well-formed formula? Well-formed formula is actually a logical expression that has a meaning, and it can be defined according to these criteria. What are those criteria? All atomic propositions are well-formed formula. If P is a well-formed formula, then not P is also a well-formed formula. If P and Q are well-formed formulas, then P and Q, P or Q, P implies Q, P double implication Q are all well-formed formula. Okay, now sequence is a well-formed formula if and only if it can be obtained by a finite number of applications of these rules. Okay, so basically a well-formed formula is, it is a combination of either it is a simple proposition itself or it is a combination of these based on the operations not, and, or, implication and double implication. Okay, so this is how we form complex set of propositions. Okay, these are rules which you already know. P or Q is same as Q or P. P and Q same. Okay, commutativity, associativity, distributive, all these rules, De Morgan's law, etc. I must have studied since school also. So all these rules you can just look at. Okay, now we come to inference. Inference is how given some knowledge or given some information which we have. Inference is how we can derive new knowledge from whatever we have. So we derive based on some set of rules or what are known as tautologies. So we look at these. Okay, first is addition. What addition says is, let us say we have a proposition P which is true, then we can infer that P or Q will be true, because if P is true, then P or Q will turn out to be true, right? That is a OR operation. So if P is true, you can infer that P or Q will be true. Similarly, if P is true, Q is also true, then you can say P and Q is true. Similarly, if P and Q is true, then you can infer that P is true as well as Q is true, right? Now, next is modus ponens. So modus ponens, what it says is, we know that P implies Q is true. At the same time, we also know that is, if P is true, then Q is true. That is what modus implication says. If P is true, Q is true. Now we know that P is true, then we can infer that Q is true. Similar, but in a reverse way is modus tollens, where we say if P is true, then Q is true, but Q is not true, therefore we infer that P is not true. Similarly, we have hypothetical syllogism. P implies Q is true. Q implies R is true. Then you can say P implies R is true. Okay. So these are some tautologies based on which we do inference. Okay. We look at some examples. Let us say we have a proposition P which states that he works very hard. And similarly, Q is he is the best employee in the company. Now, according to simplification, so what is simplification? Simplification, we say if P and Q is true, then you can infer that P is true, right? So we have a statement, he works very hard and he is the best employee in the company. So from that, we can infer he works very hard. Similarly, what is modus ponens? Modus ponens, it says if P implies Q is true, sorry, if P then Q, that is P implies Q is true, and if P is true, then you can say Q is true. Now, here we have a statement, if you're tall, then you can play basketball. That is what P implies Q is. If you're tall, then you can play basketball. Now, I'm saying Arjun is tall. So, from this, you can infer that Arjun can play basketball. So, you have come up with new knowledge. Arjun can play basketball from these two statements. Similarly, another example for modus tollens is if you are tall, then you can play basketball. So we already stated that as P implies Q. Now Arjun cannot play basketball. Okay, Arjun cannot play basketball. So from this, according to modus tollens, you can say that Arjun is not tall. Okay, so this is all about our propositional logic and how we can uh, what are propositions, how you can use logical connectives to form complex propositions, and also how we can do inferencing using these sets of rules. That is what we have covered. Okay.